Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and like the title of the video says, I wanted to try a quick little experiment using some Nuvo Glacier paste. I will have a more in-depth video using these glacier pastes coming probably this weekend. Got just a million things going on. So I've used them once before, really like them. I hadn't used this green color yet, and I've had this idea in the back of my head for weeks now. Specifically with this stencil. So I sat down and I was like, I just want to see what's going to happen. So, like I said, I will talk more about the glacier paste in the upcoming video. But really, if you've used, embossing paste in general, glitter paste, etc. before, the biggest difference with this is the consistency. It's very soft. It's like really soft butter. And then there isn't glitter in it. It has mica flakes in it, so it gives this really neat, almost foiled sort of a look. And it also dries extremely flat. So when I'm now that I've kind of used them a few times, my biggest thing is I find the easiest way to use it is just like I'm showing here. I am applying the glacier paste. This is the Green Envy. And I'm using it over Simon Says Stamp's Tumbling Leaves stencil. I've literally had this stencil this is the first thing I thought of when I got this stencil. This came out in Stamptember. Yeah, it was part of the Stamptember release. And I wanted to use it with the glacier paste because I was like, ooh, this is going to look pretty. So I apply it first with one of the Nuvo Media spatulas. But what I really like to do is take this this is the ThermoWeb Stencil Pal. And it just, you could almost even use like a ruler for this. I like this because it's got a little bit of give to it. But really, any sort of straight edge would work. But I like using this just to, create a very thin, even coat. And then that's it. So I apply it. I can take all the excess and put it back into the jar. And then even in this case, I removed the stencil and I had a bunch on my little craft mat here. So same thing. I can just kind of scoop that up with the little media spatula and stick it back in the jar. And then the other thing to note with the glacier paste, but this also applies to glitter paste, the Nuvo embellishment mousse, anything that you might have more difficulty with them drying out because they're all water-based products, is I take a little square of press and seal. You could also use just regular cling film, plastic wrap, possibly even tinfoil, maybe. Tinfoil wouldn't be as effective. The press and seal is the best, but any sort of cling film to put on top of the container and then put the lid over that to seal it. That way that really helps seal it in and keeps it from drying out. So this is where the experiment came in. I have all these Ranger Speckle embossing powders that I showed in a haul whenever, it was months ago. And I've used them a couple times, but I was really curious to see how it would work over some of this glacier paste. So the paste was still wet when I did this, completely wet. All I had done was taken the stencil and cleaned it off, but it had just been applied. And I just sprinkled a little bit of the Speckle. This is the Lemon Drop Speckle embossing powder. I could have just dumped it right on top if I wanted, but I didn't want to completely cover up that glacier paste. I wanted that green to really show through. I was just curious to see how the embossing powder would work. So I sprinkled that on, and then I melted the powder with my heat tool. I'm really keeping my heat tool moving because I don't want to bubble up the glacier paste. Using embossing powders over paste, this can work with almost any paste. I was just curious what it would do with the glacier paste. So it worked. It's hard to show on camera, but the paste kind of bubbled up, or not the paste, the chunks of embossing powder bubbled up originally, and they ended up forming little balls, which I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, whatever. And then after everything was dry, I ran it through my die cut machine with a rectangle wafer die, and the pressure of the machine pressed all those balls completely flat. So that's how I got that speckled texture all over those leaves. So it was kind of a neat little experiment. And I was like, hey, this works. Why not? I'm going to finish making this into a card. So now that I've got that, card front essentially background done. And I did this all on Nina Desert Storm. Because the cards I have coming up, I did all on white cardstock. So I was kind of curious how the glacier paste will look on, a different sort of background. And then after I set that aside, I die cut the Thankful Word. This is from the CZ Design Thankful 1 wafer die. And I die cut the word itself from 3 pieces of the same Nina Desert Storm cardstock. And I adhered them all together with my craft tacky glue to give them that dimension that I really like with word dies. And then I adhered that to the outline that comes with the wafer die set that I die cut from some blue cardstock. When I'd started making this card, I decided I would follow along again with this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. My last video was for the Color Throwdown Challenge. I like the colors so much that I wanted to do it again. Plus, I was kind of struggling. I was like, I don't know what colors I'm going to do. You know, when you're just feeling like things are just not flowing the way you want them to and you're struggling, that's why I like the Color Throwdown Challenge. Because it's like, okay, once I have the colors chosen for me, I can just go along with that and, you know, figure out what works. So that's what I did. And then I have this sort of mustardy rust cardstock that I stamped sentiments from the CZ Design Days of Thankful stamp set. And I actually stamped the sentiments with Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide ink. And then I die cut them with one of Simon's Sentiment Label wafer dies. And then I am going to adhere the die cut sentiment with some craft tacky glue. So I'm going to adhere that directly over these leaves. They are now completely dry. Like I said, they're dry. I had run that piece through with one of the rectangle wafer dies. And then after it pressed all that like embossing powder and kind of flattened it out really well. So that's all well and good. And then after I did that, I adhered the thankful word with the craft tacky glue. And then the 2 little like companion sentiments, one says so very and the other says for you. So I popped those on with a little piece of the Doris foam strips. So I just cut those down and then popped those around the sentiment. So now it says so very thankful for you. So after I've got that adhered into place, I need to do the inside of my card, which is that same, this is Gina K, what is it called? Honey Mustard. So this is Gina K Honey Mustard cardstock. And of course I want to add something to the inside of my card. So I decided I'm going to use that stencil again. And the stencil I just washed off in the sink. I found with the Glacier paste, they're really easy to clean off my stencils. I still clean my stencils like immediately. I don't like letting anything dry on them other than like just regular dye ink. That, you know, that always comes off no problem. But things like paste and that, I like to clean immediately so that it doesn't, otherwise it gets really difficult. But the Glacier paste, I just rub my hands with a little bit of soap in the sink with the stencil and cleans right off. So now I've got that stencil lined up again. And just like before, I'm working on this Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station. Same thing. I'm pretty sure I showed this in a whole video like forever ago. I always forget sometimes to pull this out, but every time I pull it out, I'm like, I really like this. It just makes using stencils so I don't have to tape them down all the time. So anyway, I taped off the top portion of the inside of the card with some Post-it tape. And then all I did was blend on some peeled paint and a little bit of Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide inks over the stencil just to give it that little something. And then I'm going to put my card base into my mini MISTI here because I want to stamp the sentiment with that same Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide ink. And I'm glad I used my MISTI for this because I ended up stamping the sentiment a couple times just to, you know, really pick up, because like some of the words are pretty small, but it just picks up the detail and the color and whatnot. So stamp that 3 times actually on the inside of the card here. And then all I got to do now is adhere my card front to the card base. And then as a final little embellishment and also to pull in the final color for this challenge, I'm going to add a little bit of bling. I have some Studio Caudia. These are the March crystals. This is like the turquoise color in this combo. So I'm going to, you know, kind of sprinkle these throughout the background here. So pour these into one of my little triangle trays and then just sort of figured out where I wanted to place them, aka flying by the seat of my pants, and just place them wherever, doesn't really matter. That's another one of those things where I say, like, you know, there is the rule of 3 and triangles and all that kind of stuff with design, which it's true. It is true. And, you know, there's a valid reason behind that, but more often than not, I'm just adding them, you know, odd numbers, all that sort of stuff. I agree with it, but more often than not, I just don't even pay attention. I was just like, it looks pretty here. That's great. So anywho, I adhered these all into place with my craft tacky glue, using my little jewel picker, pressing them into place, and that finishes off this card. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have a link to the Color Throwdown Challenge. I will also have a supply list with links to all the supplies I used, so you can check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!